as well. It's even longer than usual. So, quiz data. SES metrics in the playoffs. We saw an average raise of 33.4. So the SAS average was 73.2. Synergy went up by 14%. Alpha control went up by 40%, but that's not a lot when you actually look at the actual numbers. Disruption went up. Efficiency went up by half of a percentage, which, although it doesn't sound like a lot, is a lot when you compare it to everything else going on here. Creature protection went up. Everything went up apart from creature control and amber control. But amber control was fairly high. 9.9 is usually what you'd expect in decks. But when you look, but then again, looking at mass mutations has a lot higher average of amber control. So it's really interesting. 25 players decided to keep their deck out of the 138. But artifact control going up. People are starting to get a lot more aware of artifacts, and we're starting to see that things like Dav coming into play. And as we saw last week in the featured game, artifacts like Monument to Strix are really powerful. So this week we saw an increase in the playoffs of all the sets apart from Call of the Archons. Call of the Archons went down by over 10%. Like, it went down by over a third. That is a massive drop. We saw Age of Ascensions, Mass Mutation, Worlds Collide all jumping up. Worlds Collide having the biggest increase in decks, which also puts Worlds Collide ahead of Call of the Archons, with Age of Ascension really close behind. And even at this, as I say, 40.6% of decks are now Mass Mutation, but we might, as we go down the climb, we might start to see that revert back to what we were seeing before. And the biggest thing we've had from people talking about is the fact that with the SAS update, a lot of their decks from previous rounds have increased in SAS, and if they don't register, so if you hadn't registered your deck for the top 32, you'd have defaulted to your round 6 deck. And if your round 6 deck has increased in SAS, you might want to do that. The problem with that is what some people on Discord have pointed out, is that information is public information. Once you know what your opponents play, you can go check. Once the brackets have been revealed, you can go check your opponent's profile. You can go check the decks they've played in every other round. So if you're looking at the top 16, you go, okay, this is what they played at 66 SAS. This is a deck I can try to counter. So if you don't register a deck, your opponent might be able to out-meta you, which is an Ultimo Fox play because he's a meta, by purposely picking a deck which counters your opponent's deck for the round of that SAS. Which to me is like thinking a whole new level. So, exactly, the mind games. So if I wanted to take down Not Tonight of the Wolfpack in the top 32, I'd go back to I'll go look at Not Tonight's deck from the round 6. I'm like, okay, that's the kind of deck they're playing, but you won't know who you're playing in the top 32. However, the top 16, the brackets won't change, so you'll know who you're most likely going to face in the top 16. So you can go and prepare what kind of deck you're going to go and play. And this is where it starts to get a lot more meta, and it starts to get a lot more about the deck choices. And it's going to be really interesting as we go down the SAS. Moving forward, look at the house playoff here. Shadows on the increase, Logos on the increase, Dis on the increase, Mars on the increase. Sorry and Starlight's definitely on the increase, but every other house takes a bit of a dip. Shadows is almost in 20% of all decks, with Logos and Dis very close behind. That means that over half the decks contain at least Shadows, Logos, or Dis, possibly altogether. Robin is now falling to 5%. And it kind of makes sense with the dramatic drop in colour, and in AOA you're not really looking at the Bromnar side of things, although AOA Bromnar is one of the strongest. AOA is also, with AOA and KOTE being the lowest represented, it makes sense that Bromnar is quite low because it's not in Mass Mutation, and Worlds Collide Bromnar is a meme. Most Collide has been played more, so Saurians and Starlights on the increase, and Mass Mutations on the increase as well, now in more than half the decks. And Saurian and Starlights had good support houses in there. Makes a lot of sense. Moving on to the most common cards, we've got. Oh, well. No, let me go back. There we go. Cards in the playoffs. For those of you who want to get a little bit ahead in the quiz, keep an eye on these cards because the quiz is about cards. In uncommons, Lights Out still ranking up in the top, but Group Think Tank coming up. We have a 4-way tie for third with Hidden Slash, Special Delivery, Sloppy Aware Book, and Pandemonium. Two of those cards being Amber Control makes a lot of sense. Library of the Damned coming in for Positron Bolt and 7th. And so many ties for 9th. Life Ward, Gongoozle, Old Bruno, Robot Venom, Free Market, Spirits Away, and Interdimensional Graph all rocking the 9th spot. Very interesting to see because we've got a much wider, but all these, apart from 2, all these cards are the top houses, Logos, Shadows, and this. With Sanctum bringing up Free Markets to Spirits Away, which kind of makes sense because Free Markets is a very powerful card. Especially given the kind of power that you're going to see when playing against the 9 sets, because you're looking at you're looking at a 5-point card at the best of times, and it's very likely you're going to come across more Sanctum. So Free Markets is a very powerful card from Sanctum, and now I'm just at scoring. Martian Generosity makes its way into the rares, but we'll come back to that in a second. Routine Job coming in at first, which out of the procedurally generated rares, Routine Job is probably one of the strongest. Neutron Shark, Ungus, Master Plan, Niflconk, Ultra Graviton, which means we've seen a drop in the Deus Ilias, which is no longer in the top of the rares. So that seems to be a one-round wonder. But Master Generosity coming in. Master Generosity, a very powerful card. If you want to see a beautiful Master Generosity play, please do check out the AC Regulars versus the Southwest Netclifters Captains game, which I was able to quickly record and drop on YouTube today. It's got a hell of a turn with a Martian Generosity off a Helper bot. Hater's Raptor, I think, is going to be a very interesting card. It's all going to be about how many you get. I think it's a nice little upgrade on the Plaguerats. But Malphacon is one of my favourite disc creatures in Mass Mutation. It just makes so much power with Johnny Longfingers as well being a very. It's great to see these underrepresented cards for Mass Mutation. Johnny Longfingers is my favourite card in Mass Mutation because it's a game changer card. It makes you look at the board and go, okay, I need to change how I'm handling the board. Because if you can protect Johnny, you can make every one of your mutants a stealing engine, which is beautiful. You just watched the game, Ultimo. Yeah, it told you it's disgusting. And Erina, I do like Erina because it's got the healing aspect, which you don't get with the Stealer of Souls, and it fits very well into the Untamed sort of dynamic. So now we move the best teams to the qualified ones. So the qualified teams don't count because they've not played. So we are missing out on 18 teams here. The top houses have changed with Mash, Generosity, and Primus Ingus being in the top 10. So it's going to be quite interesting to see how this dynamic changes when we look at the top 32. So I don't know if Letops will do all 3 cuts or if he'll just focus on the top 32. Because if it was mine, that's what I'd want to focus. But we'll still have 3 cuts going on, which, even though this is our 3rd time doing it, people still get confused by it. And yes, you're not out just because you've lost the chance to win the overall coat. You can keep playing if you want to. I know a lot of people do jump out. You play Mars only if you're Martian Generosity. Not true. Not true. I know a few people here playing Mars because they've got Shatterstorm and some key abduction shenanigans. Master Generosity is a good Mars card, but Mars is still a very powerful house even without it. Combos in the playoffs. So Heart of the Forest is dead for another week. There is no Heart of the Forest. After all the complaints we had about it being overpowered in this format, we've only seen 9 and not a single Heart of Forest was used in the playoff. 2 Jenkers, 2 Briggs, 1 Ganganaut, so we've lost 8, we've lost 4 each of those combinations. The 6 Emperor Exile, the Tribute 6 Emperor Exile combo didn't increase or decrease. 1 Dark Amber Vault was taken out. That's probably was in one of the qualifying ones. Only 1 deck with Bonifing Safe House. 2 Lash Broken Dreams decks. 2 Sins deck, I think one of which we're going to be seeing played today. And 1 Neutron Shark Reassembled Automaton. The big question is, does that mean that the Binary Rupture Interdimensional Graphs and the Ganganauts were used by the top decks? Because we lost 8 decks there, which is probably one of the biggest drops we've seen, apart from the Bonifing Safe House deck, which was 5. Were those the decks that help people get into the playoffs? Because we did have 4 teams go 7-0 as well. Very interesting. Win rates in the playoffs. So look at the numbers we've got here. Age of Ascension coming in with the highest win rate of 63.2. One of the lowest representation, but the highest win rate. That is absolutely huge. Mass Mutation, very close behind with the biggest representation. But Call the Archons and Worlds Collide coming in very low again. It's really bad to see Call the Archons, especially in how little representation there is now, having such a low win rate. Call the Archons. Hey JT, what's up? AOA, I said this at the beginning of KOTE, and I've said it all the way through. AOA was going to dominate KOTE, and it kind of has. It's very dipped in its representation, but if I was coming across an AOA deck in this format, I was always more on edge than taking on any other set, because AOA is people's least favorite set, so it's the set that people have the least experience playing against, and you can often forget about a lot of cards that can cause you a lot of trouble. I legitimately forgot Eureka was a thing, and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that's a really good card. Yeah, why not? World Collide win rates in the toilet, and especially in its increasing representation. It's going to be quite interesting to see how this goes when we move on to the top 32. But Call the Archons World Collide need to pump those numbers, those rookie numbers. Looking at the house win rates now, Logos coming in with a 59.6, the highest out of them, with Sanctum right behind with 58.3. Very good numbers coming in from those guys. Then we're seeing Shadows coming with the only house with a positive win rate, which means that the majority of houses that won this time were Logos, Shadows, and Sanctum, with Untamed and Bromna having exactly 50%. I don't think we've seen that before. An exact 50% win rate, which is really cool. But Dis coming in at 45.1. Poor Dis. I love Dis, but it is a double-edged sword. Saurian, Starlights, and Mars all still underperforming, but the Saurian and Starlights, especially seeing that we saw an increase in their representation, so a lot more people bringing the decks that had them in, but still getting beat down. I can't wait for the end of KOTE wrap up where we can actually see the full extent to this. But it's starting to, we're seeing that Sanctum took a set off and have come back a lot stronger. So hopefully we'll see the same with Mars, because as Ultima Fox said, they've been gone a long time. If we see Mars come back in the set 6, they might be coming back a lot more even, a lot more. What's the best way to put this? A lot more viable and a lot more evened out, but able to pack it up, because we saw the Sanctum. So, onto the quiz. My quiz is, we have 9 questions here.